Welcome to the Music Nut program. I am John the Music Nut. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you for joining me for my first weekly series here on the Music Nut program. I'm going to talk about one of my favorite bands of all time, the Smithereens, and their album, Especially for You. This was their first LP. This came out in 1986 on Enigma Records, later on Capitol Records. This is their CD. It's not going to come up too well in the light, but there you go. That's why I'm wearing the t-shirt here. Who are the Smithereens? Smithereens were a power pop band formed in Carteret, New Jersey. The Smithereens, in their original incarnation, were Pat Denizio, lead vocals, songwriter, and guitar. He wrote about 95% of their songs. Jim Babchak was their lead guitar player. Mike Messeros was their bass player. Dennis Dyken was their drummer. To this day, Mike, Dennis, and Jim are still performing as the Smithereens with guest vocalist. Sadly, we lost Pat Denizio in 2017. Who are the Smithereens? What do they sound like? Take Buddy Holly with the early Who, and what I mean by the early Who, think of the early albums, The Who Sings My Generation. That's the Smithereens. A little bit of Elvis Costello in there as well. Early Elvis Costello when he was with the Attractions. They came out in the 80s, and they were a band at a time. They got played a lot on college radio before they finally crossed over on to your album-oriented rock stations and your pop stations here in the States. So let's get to talking about their first album. To me, a classic, in my opinion. My favorite album of 1986 is Especially for You. We start out with Strangers When We Meet. This is where you really hear the craftsmanship come into full bloom. These guys were already together 6 years. They were fully formed. They already had their act together. Strangers When We Meet is a great pop song with an excellent bridge, harmonies, excellent chorus. The last chorus, they take it up musically up a step. It's got a nice fade out as well. There is a sense of melancholy in their lyrics. That was Pat's trademark. He wrote poppy songs with a hint of rock that were really catchy, but there was always this darkness and sadness in the lyrics. Before I go on, let me also state Don Dixon produced this album. Don Dixon was the perfect producer for the Smithereens. Their albums with Don Dixon sound like they could have been recorded in the 1960s. They even sound like they could be recorded today. Listen to Me, Girls, the second track, that's more jangly pop. It has another wonderful bridge. This sounds a little more like Buddy Holly, but excellent track, very memorable, very catchy. Groovy Tuesday, the tempo is raised a bit on here. This sounds a little more like The Who, especially when they speed up at the end. Groovy Tuesday is really cool in the fact that during the verses, Pat's singing and the other band is chiming in with woke up at the end of each line, which is a nice touch, nice hook. Excellent song. There's a very dramatic end to it with the fade out where they sing Nothing Lasts over and over again. It's really cool. Cigarette. This is somber. This is done as a waltz. This reminds you of REM. Early REM, IRS Records REM. Kenny Margolis plays the accordion here. In the liner notes to this version of Especially for You, Dennis Dyken refers to him as the fifth Smithereen. This is a nice change of pace. It is very morose and sad. It's short. A lot of songs on here are very short, around a 3-minute mark. Once in a while, you hit the 4-minute mark. Very strong track. I Don't Want to Lose You, even though lyrically it has more of a desperate feel, musically it picks up the pace here. Another great pop rock track with a nice bridge, Her harmonica on here is very good. I wrote here, joyous song with a more melancholy lyric. That would be I Don't Want to Lose You. Now, Time and Time Again is one of my favorite Smithereen songs ever. This one just sounds like it could have came out in 1966 with its rip-roaring guitar line. The guitar line's very memorable. You got the harmonies during the pre-chorus. Another great bridge on here. No solo on it. It's just a great power pop song before they had a name for power pop. Behind the Wall Sleep. This would be their second most famous song on this album, and it's been a show opener for many, many years. I've seen them 6 times. I believe they opened with this 5 times out of 6. This just rocks like hell. The lyrics are some of Pat's finest on here. Excellent song. The next song is In a Lonely Place. Now, this is has more of a Baroque feel from the 60s. And guesting on vocals here is Suzanne Vega, before she hit with Luca on Solitude Standing. Little known fact that you'll see on the liner notes on this album is that Suzanne Vega was once Pat Denizio's boss at an office job, and she fired him. Excellent song. The vibraphone on here. It's very, very 1960s, but again, it's a nice change of pace for a power pop album. They were already showing diversity early on. Excellent song, but it sounds like it's straight out of 1966. Blood and Roses is the most famous song from this album. It's distinguished by Mike Messeros's bass line, which was an accident because what happened was his Sun bass amp exploded in the studio. So he had to use the bass amps that were in the studio. And this was recorded at the record plant in New York City. He used their house bass amp to record this bass line. And this is one of their most memorable songs. And it has that great hook in the bass line. The guitars, at first, the way they're recorded, it sounds a little bit like Rain on the Scarecrow by John Cougar Mellencamp, which would have came out in 1985. This is an excellent track. The pre-chorus with Pat's vocal echoing at the end of each line is a nice hook. Excellent track. Crazy Mixed Up Kid, very Buddy Holly. It sounds like a Buddy Holly outtake. Buddy Holly was a wonderful songwriter who we lost at a very young age. And so many of his songs you hear today, this has that kind of feel. Hand of Glory, which was written by Jimmy Silva. This is a great rock and roll song, great harmonies on it. Dennis Dyken is really playing his butt off on this. He's really leading the charge. His drumming on here is spectacular throughout. Dennis Dyken, how I would describe him is, if you ever heard Bunny Carlos from Cheap Trick, he's like him. He plays for the song, but he plays a little louder, a little harder. One of his concerns was when they were recording, especially for you, is he wanted to make sure his snare sounded right. And his snare sounds perfect here. It doesn't have that dated reverb sound that you heard, or the gated drums that you would hear in the 80s. The drums, as well as the whole band, is recorded very well. Again, this sounds like it could have been recorded in 1966. It sounds like it could have been recorded in 2024 with more lo-fi. Alone at Midnight ends the proper album, and this is very somber, but musically it has bite, but it's got a somber feel to it. And again, distinguished by Pat's sorrowful lyric and vocal, and Mike's bass line, which is excellent. There's not a bad cut here. Everything here is very good to great. The bonus tracks are White Castle Blues, which is a rave up. It's very raucous. It's a dedication to the White Castle restaurants, the burger joints that were all over the East Coast back in the day. The next song, the last song on the album, is their take on Dick Dale's Mr. Eliminator. They did this in one take, And it doesn't have those crazy guitar sounds that Dick would get out of his guitar back then. Dick Dale is one of these great guitar players where as soon as you heard him, you knew it was him. He was the king of the surf guitar for a reason. But it's played very well, played with a lot of passion. Dennis plays like a monster on this. This is a very spirited version. Excellent way to close the album, although this is the remastered. It came out for the first time in 1992. These last two songs would be first heard in 1992 on CD and cassette on this version. I was mentioning their EPs. Now, their first EP is nearly impossible to find. Discogs has everything. You can't find this on Discogs anymore. I don't have that, but I do have their second EP, which was released on Enigma, and that's Beauty and Sadness from 1983. Now, this is a good primer for what their sound would be. It's 4 songs, about 12 minutes long. Beauty and Sadness is a very strong track. It reminds you with the drum sound, it reminds me a lot of Be My Baby by the Ronettes, although others would say it sounds like Ticket to Ride by the Beatles. Great harmonies on here. There's a hint of psychedelia to it. Very dreamy vocals. Some other guy that's like pure pop perfection. We got jangly guitars like the Byrds on here. Nice harmonies in the pre-chorus and the chorus. Tracy's World, catchy mid-tempo song. We got Pat on harmonica and lead vocals on here. Excellent track. Much Too Much, which was also a song by The Who on The Who Sings My Generation. This is an original track, though. This sounds like the Stray Cats to me. It has that very 50s feel, although you don't have rockabilly guitar in here. With the groove, it sounds very Stray Cats. And with the quick bridge and the harmonies on it and the traditional rock bass line, this works very well. And that closes the album. So this is the EP, 1983's Beauty and Sadness. You can still find this. I found this original CD a couple of years ago in Quakertown at Record Revival. So that's still, it's harder to find, but you can still get your hands on it. Especially for You is their first album. Fantastic album. My favorite album, 1986. Among other albums by the Smiths and Metallica and Queensryche and Georgia Satellites and so many other bands, this is my favorite album of 1986. So, what do you think of the Smithereens? Have you heard of them before this episode? What are your favorite songs by them? Have you ever seen them live? Please put that down in the comments. I will be talking about all their studio albums each week here on Smithereens Saturday. Next week, Green Thoughts, the album that got me into the Smithereens in 1988. So, until I see you again, do what you love, and I'll talk to you soon.